Hi there, and welcome back to Calling All Vegans. We feel honored and privileged to be sitting down with our next guest. She's a vegan psychologist, visionary, passionate animal rights activist, and the best-selling author of a number of books, including her latest, Vystopia, The Anguish of Being Vegan in a Non-Vegan World, which provides the roadmap for waking up the world to its own cruelty and offering insights to vegans into successfully navigating the personal and societal challenges they face in a non-vegan world. Through her private practice, thought-provoking speaking engagements, and the many other resources she offers, she is helping to create a kinder world where everyone participates on a level playing field. Please welcome Clare Mann to Calling All Vegans.
Hi, lovely to be here from Sydney, Australia.
So, Vystopia, the word you coined, has exploded all over social media and the internet in general. Can you please tell us about it?
Well, I guess, people know what Vystopia is, and I always say to people, this isn't my word, this is our word. It's a concept vegans, ethical vegans that have woken up to the reality that the world is not how they thought it was. We needed a word to explain the anguish we feel when we find out about the systematized cruelty towards animals in our world. And then we try to share it with other people. And there's that sort of resistance and almost what I call a trance-like collusion with the dark and dystopian world. There's the similarity, and truly an existential experience. But then we say, well, if I didn't know about that, what else don't I know? So we question everything, and then we're called conspiracy theorists. So it's quite a challenge.
It's interesting because my degree is in philosophy. I've got a bachelor's in philosophy. And one of the things that I learned is the more we learn and become aware, the more we realize just how little we know.
Well, there comes the bigger question because, people say, I've now found out, gosh, what's happening to animals. And a lot of vegans sort of stop there because there's so much work to do, of course, ushering in this new era. But if we don't know that, think of the place beyond veganism. Think of what we could open up and just our completely different experience of being in the world. If we vision that kind of more compassionate, a world actually without money, and I'd love to talk about that one. Because it is a form of slavery for people. I look at so many people that want to do great things in the world, and they literally spend their lives trying to buy or be in a block of concrete called a house or home, and try to put food on the table, use energy and heat and do whatever to their homes. We take that away, and we can do that, and I know perhaps we'll move into this. Life becomes very different. And imagine what it would be like that we actually had all those things. We truly collaborated and we brought ourselves together. And we weren't in this socioeconomic slavery. And in fact, a lot of our animal cruelty issues go away because they're based on the acquisition of wealth and profit, of course.
So you work with individuals to help them deal with some of these challenges. Is that correct?
Yes, I do. I run a practice in the city in Sydney, and I work with vegans all over the world. I've worked as a psychologist for 30 years in all sorts of different capacities. And I have some non-vegan clients. Mm-hmm. And that's a great opportunity, of course, to extend people's thinking. So I only work a couple of days in that capacity because I'm finding the need for people to have tools and resources to navigate this not yet vegan world is very great. So I'm actually transforming a lot of the leadership and communication programs I've had, almost veganizing them.
Nice.
Because if we give people those tools to truly collaborate and work in groups and teams without all the normal infighting that happens in any group, then we're going to be more powerful and co-create some amazing things.
In general terms, do you find that when you're working with vegan individuals, trying to come to grips with this non-vegan world that we are currently in, do you find that they're having the same challenges are coming up over and over again? And if so, what are some of those primary challenges that individuals have to deal with?
The answer to that is definitely yes. In fact, the basis of my book, Vystopia, was really a result of 10 years research, a very large survey asking people the typical symptoms that were coming and people wanted to talk about were very similar. We weren't digging around for years trying to find out the source of their anxiety and depression. They said, I know what it is. I've actually seen this slaughterhouse footage. I've seen animal testing. Now, when I try to tell people, they resist me and tell them I'm preachy, and I'm living in a reality I don't know. So things like, obviously, anxiety, panic attacks, a lot of post-traumatic stress reactions, people having nightmares and flashbacks, particularly people that have perhaps done undercover work, or certainly seen the footage, which, as we've all seen, is truly horrifying. So these are the sort of things, people's self-care goes out of the window when they see things as totally trivial, of course. So there's a lot of grief to work through as well, grief of a world that you believed was nudging in the right direction with some bad apples perhaps, that actually it isn't how you thought it was, and it's your role to be part of that solution.
Well, I think I'd be more concerned if people didn't have that reaction.
Obviously, there's reactions to things that we've been exposed to, and then that can definitely linger within us. Would you say that there's certain other triggers that make people become more aware of this?
I hope I'm answering the question, if I got the gist of what you're asking there. But I think once you've seen behind the slaughterhouse, you've seen behind the dairy industry and the testing industry, it is, and you're a philosopher, so it's truly what I call an existential experience. The world, you wake up one day, you're truly in a foreign land. And so you walk down through the shopping mall and you don't see people having a latte. You see a bobby calf taken from its mother.
That's
You don't
exactly
see,
it.
beautiful cashmere jumper in which, to my great shame, I would have worn in the 80s and 90s. You don't see that. You see the animal in the cage. Or you walk into a chemist, a pharmacy, and you can't pick up any product without realizing it's been tested on animals. So these are constant triggers. And then, of course, our nearest and dearest, our loved ones, our family are often very resistant. Or you've got young vegans living at home. They go to the fridge and they see the flesh and reproductive secretions of our extended family. So it's constant triggers, as I'm sure you're telling witness to. This is a normal human reaction. In fact, people don't have the reaction to that. It's really concerning.
Yeah.
But what I found particularly challenging is, again, this abuse of power, the psychiatry and psychological bodies wanting to pathologize that experience, saying that vegans actually have
Mental
self-harming tendencies because they're even watching these videos, or self-abuse and their social adjustment disorders because they're challenging their family on what the rest of society is eating. And that's rather concerning, as we know, and that's one of the reasons that we needed a word to say what it wasn't, or else we'll soon have a drug to stamp out compassion and empathy in us, which is definitely not a good thing.
It's definitely a challenge when you're trying to have a conversation with someone that you have a vested interest with, someone that you care about, that has not had that awakening. Do you have any bit of advice when we're trying to deal with these people?
And relationships are hard enough, and then add this to the equation.
Absolutely. Yeah, talking about these issues, I think, within the context of relationship, which is co-created. You have a we-ness about our friendship or our relationship or our family. And I think what we're going to tell the person with will shake their world. Just in the fact that we've changed, we are offering something different to that co-created experience of we, and how this is how we experience our friendship or whatever together. I think the number one rule for all of us, vegans and non-vegans, is live with the curiosity that we have no idea what's going on inside of someone else. We make huge assumptions. We talk about kindness, compassion, loyalty, friendship. But when we actually stop to ask people, what does friendship mean to you? How would you recognize compassion if you saw it? We find that often people's associations are very different. So often we're talking about these very passionate issues, and we're not even sure the person is pressing buttons. We're talking about a compassionate world and thinking about the animal speciesism. And they may be remembering a school teacher at work that was overbearing and religious, and they're saying, hey, this is similar. So the golden rule is live in the possibility that you don't know, challenge your unquestioned assumptions, and do that becoming curious and asking questions. So, when we even say the person says, I don't want to talk about veganism, we try and give them some more, but we should stop and say, hey, just a minute, we're having a conversation on the same page. What do you understand by veganism? And invariably, they'll tell you it's a fussy diet, and you're just about to talk about some existential, deep thing about...
They think it's about pork chops, right?
Right.
Absolutely. And it's like, you're just a bit of a fussy eater. So lovely thing is, because then there's something magic, I think, happens with our viewers and dearest as well. When we get the words to come out of their mouth, and this is also an outreach if we're doing, public things as well. When they hear their own words, they have to find an image within themselves, an association of what that meaning making is for them. So if we talk about things, and what do you know about animal farming, they have to have an image somewhere. And so they have more capacity to experience the emotion related to that, rather than it becoming a debate of words going backwards and forwards in between the two of you. Well, for people listening, it is a free app. It's 30 days of free video training, mini videos on how to talk about veganism, and not in an outreach to our nearest and dearest. It's veganpsychologist.com. We actually now have it on a web version, because a lot of people are not 18-year-olds using technology all the time. They wanted to have it on there, so I got someone to do that. And it also, certainly on the app, the smartphone, you can add resources. If something has influenced you, it's, you know, you've shared a resource, say a video or a link with someone and it changed their life and moved them in the right direction, you can actually add it there, share it with vegans around the world, then we can collaborate.
So cool.
That's awesome.
And usher this new era in.
Now, how do you determine when someone actually does have a mental illness rather than someone is experiencing Vystopia?
Sure. Well, let's define what mental illness is
Okay.
and what it isn't. If I tend to look at mental disease or dis-ease as a continuum, okay, so you've got, you know, a sort of psychosis on one side. And ironically, that's when someone is totally in an internal world. You know, they're not able to relate to the outside world. I'm using words are so incomplete to try and explain someone's experience, but they're not able to function in the world. They are not able to have some sort of sense of consensual reality of us being separate or something like that. You've then got, you know, some chronic forms of depression and anxiety where the person is unable to function in everyday life. However, hands up if we've never suffered anxiety, panic attacks, suicidality, grief, don't want to be here. And I say to people, you know, I'm a psychologist and I have a mental illness because I've been suicidal, depressed, anxious at the madness of our speciesism and a world that is upside down. But when we're really looking at mental illness in terms of some categorization in a medical way is when it's outside the norm. You know, where vegans are outside the norm, so are we all mentally ill? So I always say to people, they say, well, do I need medication or whatever? Medication only works because our brains are actually the best pharmacy on the planet. They work because for some whatever reason, you know, our chemical responses, our hormonal responses react to our meaning making and our experience in the world. We're finely made between machines. We have the ability to experience our happy hormones, but also our ones that make us feel sad or panicky or wanting to get out of there. Depression is depression. It's when we feel pushed down or are pushing something down. You know, when we feel anxious, and I say to people not to minimize the experience at all, is love your anxiety. It's saving your life. It's a part of you. We don't catch these things like colds. It's our experience in relation to something. However, as professionals, we need to have a responsibility to bring people to a stage when they can even look at the imbalance in their own lives. And if we look at people's diet, if we look at the chemicals in our environment, we're looking at this basic human animal. It's having to deal with such oppressive resources that affect our physical and mental health. So, you know, where people have a cocktail of drugs within them just by the food they eat. And some people are more sensitive to that. So I know I'm going a little around the houses maybe, Sue, is taking this very seriously, at the same time seeing it like a continuum. It is normal for us to feel a level of anxiety and panic in just meaning making in the world and what our life's about. Is when it gets out of proportion to the threat, when it is unconscious drivers that are influencing behavior and thought patterns that the person feels they're out of control of. I think there's many ways to bring that into awareness, to make it more conscious. The person can have a part to say in that. But for some people, they seem to have slid into a place where they need some medical intervention, perhaps through pharmaceutical medication, to bring them to a state to even consider those options.
Well, there are so many people who are walking around numbed and desensitized.
From what you've just described there, it sounds like we're saying that it's first important to be able to recognize and acknowledge what is causing this discomfort. And once we start being able to recognize it, then we can be empowered to be able to assist ourselves through various ways, be it just awareness, be it medication if necessary. But the first number one key is just acknowledging that there is this discomfort and recognizing the source of that so that we can be empowered to deal with it.
Absolutely. I mean, I trained both in scientific psychology, of course, and organizational, but I also trained as an existential psychotherapist. I love that because it doesn't pathologize the human condition. But what it does say is that there is often a denial of the choices we have available to move forward in our lives, or we can't see the options available. And I see so many people that fall upon words like depression and anxiety. Oh, I have depression. Heaving a sigh of relief as if it's not my fault. As opposed to, I have developed this in response to something. What is it telling me, or where is it denying that I have a choice to change my predicament? Now, you may not like the choices in front of you. Maybe you're in an unhappy relationship. And the person who says, for instance, you know, I could never leave my partner. I could never leave my children. And I say to them, well, yes, you could. People do it all the time. It's, as far as certainly as your children, it's not desirable, probably not going to happen. But if you accept that you can do it, you can move to a place of empowerment. It's not that you can't leave your children, you're actually choosing not to leave them. And then, but it means that therefore, if you've chosen that, how are you therefore going to live with that and experience and make that one where, you can have a better experience and a better experience of parenting around it.
Lots of food for thought there.
That's a lot to unpack there.
Well, along with other animal rights groups, you do work with Anonymous for the Voiceless. In your opinion, how effective are vigils and street demonstrations like Cubes of Truth in creating a vegan world?
I am a very passionate supporter of Anonymous for the
Sure are.
Voiceless. I think what Paul and Sal have originally put together and shared with the world and made it easy for people to very quickly come together and have a very provocative conversation in public. Street activism, some people say, does that really change people? Now, if I hadn't stood in the Cube of Truth many times behind a mask, experienced the reactions of people, I too would be asking, is this just an emotional reaction? Does it result in behavior change? I believe that particularly when there is a mask on, I think it's very powerful. Because if I was to show any of you, hey, look at this slaughterhouse footage, look at really where our food comes from, and I'm just talking to you as someone at work or something, you have to experience those feelings, not only in relation to the horror of what the vast majority believe it is, you have to experience it in relation to me, who has a vested interest and a position on it. I think what the Cube of Truth does with the masks and also the brand of that it's like almost a street show, theatrical thing where people stop, is people are forced to experience that only for a short while. They experience their feelings in relation to the actual horror without the interaction, the social interaction of the dynamic. What then happens, of course, is outreachers would come forward and engage them in a conversation of, do you understand what this is all about? It's a very powerful tool to open people up. People may not change on the spot. I have seen people do that. I've seen people become activists right away. But it's moving them, and they can't unsee that. We can't get them to see Dominion and Earthlings sometimes, but they see that. And then they see something else. They see something about greyhounds or puppy mills or exotic animals. And then someone says that they had a health problem and this changed their life by giving up dairy. I feel a lot of people then move towards a tipping point. So it either directly brings that into people's awareness in association also with the public place, their consumer choices, and then the quality of the outreach is going to be important.
One of the key things that I find with AV and the Cube is there's multiple layers going on. Like you said, there's the distance for the viewer because of the mask being worn. Then there's the outreacher that helps people take that, digest it a little bit. But then there's the calling card with further resources that empowers them to be able to take that next step themselves. And I think those three things sort of together.
What's interesting though, and I've seen this over the last decade I've been a vegan. Gosh, I wish I knew what I know now. I stopped eating meat 40 years ago and I just read about an abattoir. We all come to this in different ways. But over the last 10 years, when people come together to do any form of activism, they are subject to the same group dynamics that any other group is subject to. And I think a lot of the biggest concerns these days is infighting between vegans, or people enjoying the power. I don't quite mean that. Is having a platform to go, oh my gosh, we can really do something. And egos need to be kept in check. And it's not about, person-centered activism. It's about us being there of service to the animals. In any other group, it happens. But, there's a lovely little model I'd like to share about group development. And it's forming, storming, norming, performing. We come together, we form, we have a goal, a superordinate goal, something bigger than ourselves, and we're passionate, and we lay awake at night thinking about it. How can I therefore be of service? We form, we come together, but then we start to have differences. We start to have jostling for position. We have people not liking the rules. We have people wanting, through their own history and background, we won't bring our baggage to the table. And differences start to happen. In other words, that's the storming stage. Now, at that stage, people either disband, or there's infighting, or people say, come on, we're all on the same side, let's get on. It all gets pushed underneath. When we have a vehicle to have those conversations that matter, and we talk about our diversity and differences, that is the only way we co-create, and people commit to what they create. We can create the norms about which that individual group is going to operate. If we try to leapfrog over those differences, it just goes underground. We get splinter groups, we get politics, and we never truly get to a stage of consensus, which is the extent to which the norms of good behavior, attendance, support, the languaging, whatever we're going to do to support each other and challenge each other. So I say to groups, we need to do work on ourselves. We need to realize it's normal and predictable to fall out. but we need to transmute that into something else, or else the only ones to suffer are the animals.
Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the work you've done with Animals Australia? Animals Australia, what an amazing organization.
Oh, absolutely. It's very interesting. I've had the great pleasure to see Animals Australia grow over the last 10 years. And it was through Animals Australia's video on the factory farming of pigs that I became a vegan. I was vegetarian, gosh, so much to my own sadness, for many years. Luckily, I thought I was allergic to dairy products, but actually I found out I wasn't a baby calf. Which is but, so I think went into my diet. And there was a different road to there. I came across pig dog hunting and other things. But when I came back to Australia and I saw that footage, I can honestly say in 20 years of being a psychologist, having worked in homicide, having worked in the Middle East, nothing prepared me for the pain I would feel.
Oh, yeah.
The depravity of the size of the problem. I'm getting a shudder as I am. And it was through Animals Australia, and I called them up at that time 10 years ago, and they knew I know well, I have great respect for it, and the whole team. I said, what can I do? And I was able to get involved at a very early stage there with some communications training. And also I started to MC rallies with live exports and factory farms and greyhounds and all sorts of things. And the lovely thing about Animals Australia, and this is where I get very tired at these criticisms. Oh, is it a welfarist organisation? We need to be abolitionists. Do you know, we're all abolitionists at heart. Yeah. And yet Animals Australia do enormous amount of work in finding about what is the best language they can find to usher people into this new area. They have a vegetarian path. It's vegan. But they find with the Australian public, who some of them may be kicking and screaming, running from the door at the thought of vegan, they have chosen to call it vegetarian, but hundreds of thousands of vegetarian packs are going out. We know we've had the biggest veganuary this year. They do amazing work. We've had nearly 20 exposés into the live export trade of what's happening, and also to draw light on what's happening here. What's very interesting with Animals Australia is they have spoken to the public very well, and they adhere to that compassionate heart. We're better than this. This isn't Australian. There's a real term. This isn't Australian. And what was interesting, it's the first animal protection group that has challenged and was due to take the agriculture department to court, which was extraordinary, and also the biggest exporter, manual exports of sheep to the Middle East. They put a call out to people to say, we need to raise money, and all, of course, the stalwarts come back on when we're all regular supporters and financial supporters. The non-vegan public were throwing money at them to support that legal campaign, because they said, we've seen this in our living rooms, the animals being cooked alive on Australian boats, with this champion young man, a young man in his 20s, put his whole life and career, he would have gone to prison.
I remember that.
I also have it on very good authority that he's been very well looked after in a different part of the world. And what an extraordinary young man.
Yeah.
The public like that. They like the whistleblower, and they said, look, this is just not right. They have to make another link, of course, to their own consumer choices. But Animals Australia did a wonderful job of talking to us about this is not single issue campaigns. And I think that's something that has really been very helpful for them. They have a huge following. I knew them when they were only 7 people strong. They punched well above their weight, and now there's well over 30 of them. But I take my hat off to a bit of an unsung hero, and she, at the moment, when if she hears this, is Glenys Ugis, she's the chief executive officer there. And she has a way to manage teams, hold the strategic vision, and manage that group of people, manage the organisation. So there's a lot of front people at Animals Australia, mainly Lynn White. They don't really care who's in the front line. The egos have been left at the door. You've got a fabulous group of people that engage the vegan and non-vegan public and are making massive changes, not only here but around the world.
You actually have to get going soon, so we'll have to wrap it up. Did you want to tell people what you're off to do?
In an ideal world, I would never call an animal a pet, but I have people that live with me that have more legs than I do. If I live in a world, if anyone's seen Inspector Rex, that lovely thing where the dog in Vienna is he always solves these cases for the police. And he's walking in and out of shops. He goes and unfortunately gets hand rolls, but we'll put that to the side for a moment. He goes into the shops. Nobody's afraid of him, people in the street. Our speciesism means that we, love pat out some animals, as we know, and eat others and wear ones, as my dear friend Melanie Joy says. So we've domesticated dogs and cats. So I think we have a responsibility in certainly looking after them. So I have a new rescue coming into my life, a third baby who's coming in. I have a 14-year-old at home. a 15-year-old who died last year before last, which was very sad, and a 17-year-old who was from a hoarding situation, who nobody thought would live beyond 12 when I rescued her, and she lived on a vegan diet until she was 17. So today I'm going out to bring into the world Comet. Comet is a beautiful half German Shepherd Ridgeback, I think. I've been getting to know him. He comes from a lovely... he's a giant. He's been loving... he's had a lovely family. Unfortunately, he had a very sad beginning when he lived in a... He was in a cage for 6 months. His brother was in a fighting ring. But his beautiful family took him. And unfortunately, they've now had children. And the poor dear Comet has had an experience at some time in his life that means he's really freaking out around the children. Yeah. And he's depressed, and so he's coming to join my family of three, a 14-year-old, another 7-year-old, who is called Cosmo. So I'm going to go and meet Comet in the park, and we're going to spend some quality time and talk about the transition of when he comes to join us at the weekend to live in our home.
Thank you again for taking some time to be on the show. It's greatly appreciated. If individuals want to learn more about Vystopia, your private practice, or getting your books, what's the best way to reach out to you and find out more about?
Sure. Well, easy one to remember, veganpsychologist.com. There's not only books, there's a free interactive program called Essential Skills for Vegan Advocacy. Of course, we have the smartphone app, which is 30 days of video training. There's an Overcoming Stress and Anxiety free audio program. There's lots of books people can buy. But if we go to Vystopia.com, you can get that via the Vegan Psychologist. But just as a lovely little tip for your visitors, we have it distributed around the world. We've got arrangements so it'll be sent to people in the most cost-effective way. If they put the word Vystopia 15 into the checkout box, they get 15% off. So
awesome.
We run a regular webinar series. So if they go to Vegan Psychology, just look at the resources there. You can sign up for we're interviewing people on our webinar. We did a thing on vigils. Our last one, you can actually access that, is the power of bearing witness and vigils. And there's other free programs, and then I'm going to have some other things coming online. So, and you can contact me there. So thank you.
Creative.
Thank you so much again for being on the show. It's greatly appreciated, and I look forward to exploring your website further, because there's just a wealth of knowledge there that's accessible to everyone.
I think I can safely say that all of us here look forward to the day when the collective consciousness gets elevated to the point where Vystopia becomes utopia. Most humans are in a trance, so when the tipping point comes, the human herd should naturally follow one another right into a vegan world. But until that new day dawns, it's important for us to perform self-care and be in the best frame of mind to enjoy every second of the massive changes that are just around the bend. So thank you so much for joining us, Claire.
That quote I love. Thank you for everything you do, and
thank you so much.
Keep up the good work. We'll see
you
this
too.
new day dawn.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.